The twin suns of Verid IV burned high above the training compound, casting long shadows across the red sands. Rows of predator cubs stood in formation, their scaled and furred bodies shining with sweat and dust. Their instructors barked orders in harsh, guttural tones that made the air tremble. It was a day for strength, for competition, for proving who was born to lead, and then the gate opened. A wave of silence rolled through the field. The instructors turned. The cubs froze mid-strike. Even the mechanical birds that circled above seemed to pause. Because walking through the gate was something none of them had expected. A human. She walked slowly, not afraid, her boots crunching on the sand. Her uniform was simple, a worn military jacket, dust-stained cargo pants, a training patch on her shoulder. Her eyes were sharp, calm, focused. She moved like she had been here before, even though she clearly didn't belong. The aliens whispered to each other in disbelief. Is that one of them? A Terran? Here? Why would a soft-skinned creature join our training? The lead instructor, a massive crimson-furred Dravak, stepped forward. His claws gleamed like polished knives. His deep yellow eyes locked on the newcomer. Identify yourself, outsider, he growled. The human stopped, saluted briefly, and said in a calm voice, Sergeant Alara Holt, Terran Defense Corps, reporting for joint training assignment. The name rolled off her tongue like it carried weight, and maybe it did. Dravak narrowed his eyes. We train predators here, he said slowly. Creatures born for the hunt. What can a human teach them? How to hide behind machines. A soft smile touched Alara's lips. Maybe, she replied. How to fight without losing their soul. The field erupted in growls and hissing laughter. The instructors snorted. Some of the younger cubs mocked her from a distance, making clawing gestures in the air. But Alara stood still. She didn't flinch, didn't respond. She just looked around with steady eyes, as if measuring the field, the distance between them, the weight of their anger. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but clear. I didn't come to be better than you, she said. I came to learn what makes you strong. The words hung in the hot air like a challenge. Dravak snorted, his tail slamming into the ground with a thud. Then learn, human. If you survive the day, you may speak again. The first trial. Within minutes, a training circle was cleared in the sand. The young predator cubs gathered around, their eyes bright with anticipation. Alara stepped into the center, tying her hair back. Her movements were slow, controlled, almost ritualistic. Dravak lifted his hand, and the roar of the crowd fell silent. 2 minutes, he said coldly. Survive. That is all. Alara nodded. Understood. The whistle blew. 5 cubs rushed her at once. They were fast, blurs of claws and teeth, trained to overpower any target. But Alara moved like water. She slid under a swipe, ducked a lunge, and spun to redirect another's momentum into the sand. Her motions weren't brutal. They were efficient, graceful. Like a dance she had practiced 1,000 times. She didn't strike to injure. She used balance, timing, breath. Each movement was precise, measured. By the first minute, half the cubs were panting. Why is she not attacking? One instructor whispered. She does not need to, another murmured back. She is making them fight the air itself. When the timer buzzed, Alara was still standing in the center, untouched. Dust swirled around her boots. Her face was calm. Dravak's eyes narrowed. No one had ever survived the first trial without blood. Enough, he roared. The human passes. Barely. Alara nodded and offered a small bow of respect to the cubs. They're strong, she said softly, but they don't trust their instincts yet. The words confused them. They were used to commanders who yelled or beat them into obedience, not someone who spoke with gentle honesty. The smallest one among the crowd stood a small cub named Rikra. He was the youngest, barely past his first molt. His fang was still growing in. He had been mocked for being slow, for being weak. And now this human, a fragile creature with no claws, had survived the trial he had failed twice. The shame burned in his chest. When Dravak turned away, Rikra stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You mock us," he snarled. "You don't fight, you dance. You're not a warrior." Ilara didn't move. She simply looked at him. "If you believe that," she said quietly, "then show me." The instructors shouted for him to stand down, but the cub charged, a burst of pure rage and pain. Ilara did not raise a hand. She did not step aside. Instead, she knelt in the sand as he approached. The cub slid to a halt inches from her face. His claws trembled. His breathing came in ragged gasps. He was ready to strike, but he couldn't, because the human wasn't afraid, not even a little. She looked into his eyes and spoke softly. "You're not angry at me, Rikra. You're angry because you think you don't belong here." The cub stiffened. How did she know his name? "I used to be you," she continued. "The smallest in my squad, always chasing others, always trying to prove something. But I learned something out there." She touched her heart. "Strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about what you protect." The cub's claws fell to his sides. His eyes shone with confusion and shame. He backed away slowly, then dropped to one knee in front of her. The crowd was silent. Even Dravak's expression softened for a moment, and then something extraordinary happened. The moment of change, one cub moved closer to Ilara, then another, and another. Within seconds, a dozen of them had broken formation and rushed to her side. They sniffed her hands, rubbed against her legs, making low purring sounds that no one had heard during training before. Ilara smiled and rested her hand on Rikra's head. "See? You are not alone." The instructors looked at each other, bewildered. Dravak took a step forward, his voice low. "They never do that. Not to anyone." "Maybe," Ilara said, "because no one ever showed them they could." Dravak stared at her for a long time. For the first time in years, he felt something he had forgotten. Respect. He raised his clawed hand to the watching crowd. "The human," he announced, "has earned her place among us." A roar of approval echoed across the training field. The cubs lifted their heads and howled in unison, their voices mingling with the dry wind. It was not a sound of defeat. It was the sound of a pack accepting a new member. After the trial, when the sun set behind the crimson cliffs, the training grounds fell quiet. The other trainees retired to their quarters, still whispering about the human who had survived the first day without fighting like a beast. Ilara sat alone beside the barracks, watching the two moons rise. Her body ached, but her mind was calm. The alien air was thin and cold, carrying a smell of iron and dust. She found it peaceful in its own way. A small shadow moved near her feet. Rikra approached quietly, his head bowed. He carried something in his hands, a small woven band of beast fur. "It's for you," he said shyly. "It means part of the pack." Ilara took it gently. "Thank you." "You could have hurt me today," he said after a moment. "I could have," she agreed, "but then you would have learned nothing." He blinked at her in confusion. Humans were strange. They fought with words, not fangs. Yet somehow their words cut deeper than claws. As he left, Ilara looked up at the moons again. The wind brushed her face, and for the first time since she had arrived on Verid IV, she felt something unexpected. Hope. Maybe she could teach these creatures something beyond combat. Maybe they could teach her something too. The observation deck inside, the control tower, Dravak stood before the observation screens, watching the recordings from the day. He saw the way she moved, an efficient, unafraid, gentle yet unyielding. He saw the moment the cubs had chosen to trust her. And he felt a twinge of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. "Human," he muttered under his breath. "You fight without hate. You win without domination. Perhaps there is strength in that." He closed the screen and looked out the window where Ilara still sat under the moons. Somewhere in the distance, the cubs were howling again. But this time, the sound was different. Warmer. Loyal. And for the first time in the long history of the training grounds, the predators of Verida 4 had found something new to follow. Not fear, not power, but heart. The next morning came with the echo of war drums. The training compound woke early. Dust clouds drifted like smoke over the red desert as horns called every trainee to the central arena. It was trial day, the first full combat simulation of the season. Alara Holt stood at the edge of the field, fastening the woven beast fur band Rikra had given her around her wrist. The young cubs gathered near her, their tails flicking nervously. Dravak's booming voice rolled across the arena. "Today," he announced, "you fight not to prove strength, but unity." He turned, his golden eyes locking on the human. "If the human believes she belongs to the pack, she will face what they face. If they trust her, they will fight beside her." The cubs shifted uneasily. Some looked excited, others frightened. They had never fought beside a human before. Ilara's calm voice broke the tension. "We'll fight together," she said. "I trust you." It wasn't loud, but it reached every ear in the arena. The words had weight, not the command of a superior, but the promise of a companion. The whispers before battle. In the preparation chamber beneath the arena, the cubs adjusted their armor plates. The metallic scent of oil and sand filled the air. Rikra sat beside Alara, polishing his claws nervously. "They say the test this time uses real drones," he whispered. "Fast ones. Blades and lasers." Alara checked her wristband signal link. "Good," she said. "Then we'll learn faster." He blinked up at her. "You're not scared?" She smiled faintly. "Being scared means you care about what comes next." "I like that." Another cub, larger and older, growled. "Humans talk too much. We act." Alara didn't argue. "Then act with me," she replied simply. Dravak's voice thundered through the comms. "Teams ready." The gates rumbled open. The simulation begins. The arena stretched wider than a city block, half desert, half metallic ruins. The suns painted everything in gold and fire. Above, dozens of attack drones hovered, their mechanical wings humming like angry insects. Alara crouched low beside the cubs. "We move as one," she said. "Don't chase. Don't panic. Trust your ears more than your eyes." The drones shrieked and dove. Blue lasers cut through the dust. The cubs scattered, instinct taking over. One rolled aside as a blast hit the ground. Another leapt onto a broken pillar and hissed. Alara sprinted toward cover, her movements controlled. She didn't carry a blaster, only a compact baton that snapped into a pulse staff. With a flick of her wrist, she redirected a laser bolt, the energy sparking off a metal wall. Rikra darted to her side, panting. "They're everywhere!" Alara scanned the sky. "Good," she said again. "Let's make them come to us." She placed her hand flat on the sand, feeling the vibrations. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "Now listen. The rhythm of the hum. There's a gap between each attack pattern. Count 2 breaths between pulses. On 3 we strike." Rikra nodded. The others began to listen too, their ears twitching in unison. The turning point. When the next drone sweep came, the cubs didn't scatter. They moved together, fluid, fast, in rhythm. One leapt high to distract. Another slid under a beam to tackle the landing drone. Alara guided them like water flows through stone, calling directions in short bursts. "Left flank, rotate. Hold the center." For the first time, the predators fought as a true unit. Not wild, but coordinated. Dravak watched from the observation deck, his arms folded. "Impossible," he muttered. "They've never obeyed commands like that." Beside him, another instructor whispered, "She's not commanding them. She's synchronizing." Below, Alara vaulted over a rock as a drone swooped down. Her pulse staff snapped open midair, striking the machine's sensor eye. It crashed into the sand with a hiss of smoke. The cubs roared in triumph, their tails raised. But the celebration was short-lived. A new set of drones dropped from the upper gate, heavier, armored, faster. These weren't training bots. They were real combat units. The crowd gasped. Dravak's jaw clenched. He hadn't authorized that level. Someone had changed the simulation. Alara saw the shift immediately. "Stay behind me," she yelled. The storm. The new drones fired plasma rounds that burned through stone. Alara ducked behind a metal slab as heat washed over her. A blast knocked 2 cubs to the ground. Rikra cried out, "They're hit!" Alara grabbed a shard of armor and pressed it against the nearest cub's wound. "You'll be fine. Focus on breathing." The plasma bolts kept coming, bright as lightning. Ilara's communicator crackled with static. Dravak! The settings are wrong. Someone increased the difficulty. No answer. She gritted her teeth and looked at the cubs. We can't wait. We move now. They dashed through smoke and dust, staying low. The drones tracked their heat signatures, but Ilara had seen this before. She remembered a battle long ago on a different planet, when machines hunted her team in the dark. She tore a strip from her uniform and tied it around Rikra's arm. Hide your heat, she said. Sand cools fast. Roll in it. The cubs obeyed, coating themselves in dust. When the next volley came, the drones lost their lock. Now, Ilara shouted. The pack leapt as one. Their claws slashed through metal, their roars echoing against the canyon walls. Sparks rained from the sky. Dravak stared down in disbelief. They're adapting mid-battle, he whispered. They're thinking like her. The sacrifice, but the last drone, a heavy enforcer, dropped from above, firing continuously. Its red eye focused directly on Ilara. She saw it coming but had no cover left. Rikra saw it too. Without hesitation, he lunged. The plasma bolt hit his shoulder, sending him tumbling. The smell of burnt fur filled the air. Rikra! Ilara screamed, running to him. She pulled him behind a broken beam, pressing her hand against the wound. He coughed, eyes flickering. Did we win? Not yet, she said, voice trembling. The drone turned toward them, charging another blast. Ilara knew she couldn't outrun it this time. She looked down at the small cub whose fur was darkened with ash and whispered, You rest. I'll finish this. She stood up slowly, her pulse staff glowing faintly blue. The arena crowd went silent. The human walked out alone into the open sand. The drone locked onto her, its red eye flashing. Dravak leaned forward, whispering to himself, She'll die. But Ilara didn't run. She began to move, the same calm rhythm as before. Step, turn, breath. The drone fired. She sidestepped. Another beam, another pivot. The air shimmered with heat. She waited for the rhythm. 2 breaths between pulses. Then, when she threw the staff, it spun through the air, catching the light of the twin suns before piercing the drone's core. A burst of white fire erupted, and the machine collapsed in flames. The arena roared. After the fire smoke curled upward as silence fell. Ilara stumbled but stayed on her feet. The cubs rushed to her, their eyes wide with awe. Rikra limped forward, supported by 2 others. You did it, he said weakly. No, she corrected, kneeling beside him. We did. Dravak descended from the platform, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground. He stopped before her, towering like a mountain. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he bent one knee, a gesture of warrior respect. You have done what no instructor could, he said. You made them fight for each other. Ilara shook her head. I didn't make them. They already had it in them. I just helped them see it. Dravak's golden eyes softened. Perhaps humanity's strength is not in claws or fangs, but in heart. The cubs gathered closer. Some pressed their foreheads against Ilara's arm. Others wrapped their tails around her boots. It was a sign of belonging, a mark of the pack. For the first time in the history of the academy, predator cubs purred in unison around a human. The night after, later that night, the celebration echoed through the barracks. The cubs danced around the fires, mimicking Ilara's calm steps in play. Rikra sat beside her again, his shoulder wrapped in healing gel. He looked up at her, eyes gleaming. You could have run. Why didn't you? She smiled. Because when someone protects you, you protect them back. He tilted his head. Is that a human rule? She thought for a moment. No, she said softly. It's a pack rule. They both laughed quietly under the twin moons. The laughter mixed with the hum of the night, the sound of something new being born between 2 species once divided by fear. Dravak watched from afar, arms crossed. The council won't like this, he muttered. But maybe it's time they learn. He turned toward the stars. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring questions and perhaps punishment. But tonight, for the first time, he believed that humans might hold the key to peace between worlds. The morning after the great battle arrived in silence. No drums, no orders, no laughter from the cubs, only the sound of desert wind scraping against metal walls. Ilara Holt woke before sunrise, sitting outside the barracks with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of bitter alien tea. Her uniform was torn from the fight, her hair dusted with sand. She looked exhausted yet calm. The kind of calm that came from surviving something you weren't supposed to. Inside the barracks, the cubs stirred. Rikra limped out first, his arm still bound. His golden eyes brightened when he saw her. Dravak said the council called him, he said softly. They want to talk about us, Alara nodded, staring into the horizon. I expected that. They think you cheated, he added. They said you made us disobey instinct. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's exactly what they're afraid of. The council's summons by midday, a transport ship landed near the compound. From it stepped 3 towering figures dressed in ceremonial armor, the elders of the Predator Council. Their scales gleamed black as obsidian, their eyes cold and calculating. Dravak followed behind them, his expression unreadable. When his gaze met Ilara's, he gave the smallest nod, a silent warning. The central elder, High Warden Taras, spoke in a low growl that vibrated through the air. Human Ilara Holt, you were allowed to train with the young only as an observer. Yet you altered them. You made them fight like prey, with tactics, not instinct. Explain yourself. Ilara stood tall. I didn't make them weak, she said. I made them stronger. They fought together, not against each other. Taras's voice sharpened. Predators do not share kills. They conquer. Then maybe, Ilara said quietly. That's why your wars never end. A wave of hissing erupted around the arena. The cubs flinched, afraid for her. Dravak's tail lashed once against the floor. Silence, Taras roared. This human speaks of unity, but unity breeds mercy, and mercy breeds failure. He turned toward Dravak. You allowed this contamination? You will correct it, Dravak's jaw tightened. How? The elder's yellow eyes glowed. You will order the cubs to fight her, publicly. If they defeat her, they return to their true nature. If they refuse, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood. The night before the trial that evening, the cubs gathered around Ilara in secret near the dunes. The sky burned violet as the suns dipped below the cliffs. Rikra trembled as he spoke. They want us to hurt you. I won't do it. Ilara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Listen to me. Whatever happens tomorrow, don't fight for me. Fight for what you believe is right. But they'll exile us. Another cub protested. She smiled softly. Then exile becomes home when you have the right people beside you. They sat together in silence, watching the desert stars blink to life. Some of the cubs cried quietly. Others just stared at her, memorizing the calm in her eyes. In her heart, Ilara already knew how it would end. She had seen this pattern before, but on human worlds too. Whenever someone tried to teach compassion in a place built on violence, the system struck back. Still, she couldn't regret it. She had seen their hearts change, and that was worth any cost. The arena of judgment at dawn, the arena gates opened again. Thousands gathered, instructors, elders, soldiers, civilians. The news had spread fast. A human would be judged by combat. Ilara entered the field unarmed, wearing only her tattered uniform and the beast fur band still tied around her wrist. Across from her, the cubs stood in formation, trembling but silent. Dravak's voice thundered from the command stand. Cubs of Veridar, today you face the one who challenged your blood. Show the council your loyalty. The match will end when she yields. The elders watched with cold eyes. Ilara met the cubs' gaze one by one. Do what you must, she whispered. Rikra took a shaky step forward. We won't hurt you, he said, but the elder snarled from above. Hesitation is betrayal. The arena gates clanged shut. The clash of hearts, the first cub charged, not to harm, but to make it look real. Ilara sidestepped and gently pushed him down, whispering, Sell it. Make them believe. Another cub swung high. She ducked. Sand flew. To the audience, it looked like a battle. But in truth, it was an act, a dance of defiance. Taras frowned, suspicious. They're holding back. He pressed a control on his gauntlet. Electric bands around the cubs' collars glowed red. Pain seared through them. They howled. Fighter or suffer, he roared. The cubs cried out, torn between pain and loyalty. Ilara shouted, Stop it. They're just children. But the elder didn't listen. Rikra's claws dug into the sand as he screamed, We can't, they'll kill us all. Ilara's heart pounded. She looked up at Dravak, pleading, Please stop this. Dravak's hands shook on the control desk. He couldn't disobey the council, yet something in his chest burned. The breaking point, Ilara stood tall, spreading her arms wide. If someone must bleed, she shouted, then let it be me. She stepped forward, eyes fierce. I won't fight you, the crowd gasped. The cubs froze. Taras snarled, then die like the weak you defend. The elder raised his hand to increase the voltage. Before he could press the command, a roar thundered through the arena, louder than any before. Dravak. He slammed his claws onto the control panel, smashing it to pieces. Sparks flew. The shock bands went dark. Enough, he bellowed. You call this strength? Torturing the young to prove loyalty? The elders turned in rage. You dare defy. But before they could finish, the cubs moved. All 20 of them surrounded Alara, forming a protective circle. Their tails lashed, their fangs bared, not at her but at the council. Rikra stood in front, his small body trembling yet defiant. You taught us what a pack really means, he said. And a pack protects its own. The crowd went silent. Alara looked around at them, the small scarred creatures she'd come to love, and felt tears burn her eyes. You've already won, she whispered. The rebellion of the cubs, the elders ordered the guards to advance. Dozens of armored soldiers poured into the arena, their weapons humming. Dravak roared and leapt down from the command stand, landing between the guards and the cubs. You'll go through me first. The soldiers hesitated. No one dared strike their legendary instructor. Ilara's voice cut through the chaos. Stop, no more blood. She stepped forward, raising her hands. You want me? Then let them go, Taras sneered. They are corrupted by you, human. They will never return to the fold. Ilara met his gaze. Then maybe it's the fold that needs changing. The elder raised his blade, but before he could strike, a sudden rumble shook the ground. The audience gasped. The cubs turned their heads. From the edge of the cliffs, thousands of wild predators, parents, siblings, packs who had been watching through the outer gates, began to howl in unison. Their cries echoed like thunder. For generations, no predator had ever united under a single call. Yet now they did, not for war, but for her. The new dawn, the elders saw the impossible. Every instinct screamed to control it, but the tide was too strong. Dravak stepped closer to Taras and spoke low. You can kill the human. You can silence me. But can you fight all of them? Taras's hands trembled. Around him, even his guards lowered their weapons, uneasy. Finally, the elder turned away. Leave this place, he growled. Take your poison with you. Dravak bowed his head once. Gladly. He turned to Ilara. You've changed the pack forever. Wherever you go, their loyalty follows. Ilara smiled faintly. They don't belong to me. They belong to each other. Farewell. Under the suns later, outside the gates, the cubs stood gathered around her transport ship. The sky was painted gold again, just as it had been the day she arrived. Rikra hugged her tightly, his small claws gripping her sleeve. Will we see you again? Ilara knelt to meet his eyes. You don't need me anymore. You know who you are. He pressed something into her palm. Another beast fur band, this one woven by all of them together. Then take this, so you don't forget. She smiled through tears. I never could. The engines roared. Dust swirled. The cubs watched as her ship lifted into the air, rising toward the twin suns. From the sky, Ilara looked down one last time, at the small figures standing together, heads high, tails curled around one another. The pack she had loved, the pack that had chosen compassion over fear. And for the first time in generations, the predators of Veridtharv howled not in rage but in unity. Epilogue weeks later, rumors spread across the galaxy. They said that on a distant desert world, predator cubs no longer fought to the death. They trained in teams. That they shared food, that they looked to the stars at night and spoke of a human named Ilara Holt, the heart of the pack. And in hidden corners of other worlds, humans whispered the same story, of a woman who entered a den of beasts and taught them what it truly meant to be alive. Not through power, not through fear, but through loyalty, courage, and love.